winners of this year's Tour de France. Gianni Bugno won, but Miguel Indurain kept the leader's yellow jersey and drew the praise from another Spanish champion.
The best.
Hello and welcome again to the Tour de France. We're still in the Alps this morning, but we've left the mountain of Alpe d'Huez and the scene of yesterday's great battle. We're now down in the valley, at least for the moment, in the town of Bourg d'Oisans, before we go back in the Alps for today's big showdown on the road to Morzine. After heavy overnight rain, the conditions are cool but very pleasant. There's plenty of oxygen in the air, and I think the riders will appreciate that. And it really is their last chance now to hit hard on Miguel Indurain. This is the overall classification. Miguel Indurain now leading this race by 3 minutes 9 seconds. He lost only 1 second to the Italian Gianni Bugno, who won yesterday. Claudio Chiappucci is in third place. Charlie Motte went down from second to fourth. Greg LeMond stays in fifth, but yesterday lost a further 1 minute and 58 seconds. And the surprise of the Tour de France, Luc Leblanc, is in sixth place. Well, yesterday for me and many followers of the Tour de France, the man who put up the performance of the stage was the Frenchman Jean-Francois Bernard. He rode unselfishly in defence of his team leader, Miguel Indurain. Here's Paul Sherwin to explain the tactic of the rider the French are calling this morning Saint Bernard.
When the race had covered the first 2 kilometres of Alpe d'Huez, Indurain had just one teammate left, Jean-Francois Bernard. A good ride by Bernard could move him into the top 10, but his only thought was setting the tempo for his Banesto leader and sacrificing himself for his team, a similar role to that in which we saw Indurain last year. Bugno's acceleration caused Bernard to be left behind, but he fought back and moved directly to the front of the group to try and discourage any further attacks by Bugno. After Bugno's final attack near the summit, Bernard was finally dropped. However, his work for Indurain had softened the Bugno challenge. We can expect to see similar sacrifices today along the road to Morzine.
And this is the route they face today. It's a difficult and a long one, the last day in the Alps of 255 kilometres. The 3 major climbs coming towards the end with a small uphill finish, the first time we've used this in Morzine. Now, Paul, Sherwin and myself, thank you for the questions you've been posing us by telephone. We'll do our best to continue to answer them. Anything you like about the Tour de France, the number to ring is 071 631 4444. On the Côte des Fontaines today, the first 4th category climb after 74 kilometres, Titi Clavarola was leading ahead of Claudio Chiappucci and Eduardo Chozas. Then, after 115 kilometres, a small breakaway formed of Thomas Wegmuller, Peter de Klerk and Dominique Arnaud. By the time the riders came on to the Col des Alavisto after 160 kilometres, there was a breakaway of some 6 riders, and it was Titi Clavarola leading over the top, ahead of the Italian Roberto Conti, the Frenchman Frédéric Vichot, Alberto Camargo, Martinez Torres, and the man who started the move, Espinosa of Spain. The news here was, though, that Greg LeMond was in trouble and was 3 minutes 57 seconds behind the leading rider over the top. On the descent of the Alavis, 2 riders went clear, Frédéric Vichot and Alberto Camargo. And now we're taking the pictures here as we come up towards the top of the Col de Colombière. Once they come over the top, it is 70 kilometres to go. This is the same breakaway which is breaking up. It was started by Titi Clavarola, Conti, Vichot, Camargo, Martinez Torres. Espinosa has been tailed off a little bit now. And it looks too, Paul, as though Frédéric Vichot is in trouble.
Well, Vichot's not a renowned climber. He won't suffer too much for the moment in the last kilometre. He'll let himself get dropped. And I'm sure he'll come back to this group on the descent because he's one of the best descenders in the world at the moment.
Well, a very difficult day, this last full day in the Alps for the riders. The rain is blowing in and out in tremendous storms. And the crowd here must be well soaked as we come up towards the top of the Alavis. Titi Clavarola setting the pace. Roberto Conti holding on, the Ariosta team having a great ride at the moment. But none of the overall leaders of the Tour are challenging. They're allowing these lesser men, as it were, to go clear today. Titi Clavarola first over the top. And then Roberto Conti, Thierry Claverola snatching the newspaper for what is going to be a long, wet and very dangerous descent down to the valley in Cluse. Here comes the rest of the race over the top. Camargo on the right, and it looks as though we've got Martinez Torres come through there, and at the back Espinosa. And this will be Federic Vichot, just tailed off a little bit. These are the leaders going over the top. The lead, by the way, over the yellow jersey group of Indurain, and it was only given to us about a kilometre back, was believed to be around about 4 minutes. Well, Paul, this is the end of the mountains, as it were, in the Tour de France, just the Col de Revard tomorrow, but these conditions could turn this race upside down, especially when we come to the Jouplan.
Well, definitely, because this will really heavy up the riders' muscles. And the problem is about today is when they come down the descent from Jouplan to Morzine, it's extremely dangerous and made even more so by the rain. It's very slippy in the corners. On top of that, they've got a lot of gravel to contend with, so the riders will have to be very careful. It could change the face of the Tour.
So these are the crowds who come out onto the climb. This banner here is not the finishing banner of the climb. It is, in fact, another 200 or 300 metres further on. As the riders continue to come up the ascent, we're still waiting for the yellow jersey group of Miguel Indurain. Well, last time we caught a glimpse of him on the climb, he was riding with Gianni Bugno. No surprise there, of course. But the leader over the top, Claverola and Roberto Conti, they've started their descent now. And the order after them was Alberto Camargo, Martinez Torres, Espinosa, and 31 seconds behind the leaders was Federic Vichot. And it looks to me, Paul, as though we've got Didier Vervelex leading the chase up here, which is an interesting one. A young man in his first Tour de France and riding for the Belgian Histor team, which will end its sponsorship in the sport at the end of the year. And Vervelex, a young amateur champion, is now receiving 1 or 2 offers after a very good, solid first performance in his Tour de France. Here's the yellow jersey, Miguel Indurain, led up by Claudio Chiappucci, Gerard Rouet on the right, green jersey there of Gianni Bugno. And up the jumper there, that was in fact Pedro Delgado putting newspaper up his shirt because of the long, cold descent. Just look at this now. This is the peloton Steve Bauer. I think it's Andy Hampton it was. The riders slowing down just a moment while they search for the plastic capes, and Stephen Hodge on the right with the newspaper going up as well. And this is the forward party of the peloton, but missing from the group, Paul, still Greg LeMond.
Greg seems to be the only person actually missing from the first 10 there. He obviously having a very hard time today, and he's still got a long way to go before we get to Morzine, so he's going to have to try and recuperate a little bit, but this definitely isn't the year for Greg LeMond.
Well, that group, in fact, has gone over, Paul, at 2 minutes and 30 seconds down, and LeMond has not come through yet. The last time we actually had a time check on Greg, he was over 2 minutes behind that yellow jersey group, and it looks as though Greg LeMond is now really in big trouble because he's slipping away from the top 6 in the Tour de France. And you know, the weather is so bad, this might prompt Greg today to think of pulling out the Tour.
I think he won't give up easy, that's for sure. It depends how far down he is at the feeding station. It depends how he feels. If he feels he's going to really get blown away, he may well abandon.
Well, our camera is staying with the situation here to try and pick out Greg LeMond as he comes over the top. This is another small group coming up. And although there's a Z rider in this group, it is not Greg LeMond. And these riders still have a chance of rejoining the front group. It's a long descent down to the valley off the top of the Col de Colombière. We're 1,618 metres high here. We descend to 495 metres, and then we start to climb again. And the last climb, the Col de la Jouplan, is an absolute terrible climb. There's Phil Anderson coming up. Henrik Redant with him, and Etienne de Wilde. And look at this, Greg LeMond riding in the slipstream of de Wilde, and that's a surprise.
Well, to be with Etienne de Wilde, nothing really bad to say about Etienne, but he's not the best climber in the world. He's renowned as a trackman and as a roadman sprinter. So if LeMond is climbing at this with the pace of Etienne de Wilde, he must really be going through purgatory.
Greg LeMond's Tour de France has gone to pieces since that second day in the Pyrenees, and now as he comes up towards the top of the Col de la Colombière, he is something like 5 minutes behind the leader over the summit, Thierry Claverola. That in itself is not important, but he is 3 minutes behind the yellow jersey of Miguel Indurain, and that could mean that Greg is now passing out of the top 6.
Well, that's quite a shock for Greg, because if we look back at his performances, every time he's participated in the Tour de France, he's never finished lower than third. He was third in his first ever participation. The next time he was second, and since then he's had 3 wins. So it's going to be very hard for Greg to take this, but I'm sure he'll learn by his experiences here in the Tour de France, and he'll be a better man for it.
Well, Luc Leblanc, Laurent Fignon and Andy Hampson will all leap over him today in the overall classification if the situation remains as it is at the moment. As Greg LeMond starts the long descent now, he's a good descender, but it's so dangerous on the mountains today. The riders will not take any risks, least of all the yellow jersey. And I think, Paul, now we're looking at what might become the autobus, if you can explain that to us.
Well, the autobus is what happens at the back of the field. The riders who know that they're not going to be in at the kill in a mountain stage will get together. They'll club together, if you like, to create what they call the autobus. The man at the front is the man who sets the tempo, and the only thing this group of riders want to do is get to the finish and not get eliminated.
So they'll measure their tempo. Here's Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle and Michel Denis on the left, the winner of the Kellogg's Tour of Britain last year, and will defend his title in a week or so's time as Gain on the climb up towards the top of the Colombier. It's such a shame for these people, because the pass was blocked at 8 o'clock this morning with the cars queuing to come up the climb. The police had to close the approach off some 3.5 hours before the race came up in order to make sure the cars were out of the way. But many of them, although we can see here 1 or 2 umbrellas, most of them have come up here in what is just very thin summer clothes. So we're watching the trail, watching Michel Denis come up towards the top. Hendrik Redant, I think it is. Certainly in the middle there is Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle. Over the top, on our way now to the Col de la Jouplein. Thierry Claverola in the lead with Roberto Conti. And the news at the moment is that Greg LeMond is more than 4 minutes off the pace set by the yellow jersey. So we'll take a short break.
Welcome back to our coverage on the Tour de France. Well, I'm afraid since the riders began their descent of the Col de la Colombière, the weather really has closed in around us. We are now unable to bring you our usual standard of pictures from out on the course. The reason being the helicopters cannot fly in the low cloud. Let me explain briefly how we bring you these pictures. The motorcycle-mounted cameraman beam a signal from the race right up to the helicopter that flies above them. The helicopter beams that signal to us on the finishing line. From there, with our voice on, it is satellited into your home. Well, the conditions are bad for us, Paul, but what about for the riders?
Well, the riders will face 2 major problems today. We've got the rain, and the cold will make their muscles very heavy, and they won't respond the way they expect to on a climb like this. But also the descent of Jouplein is an extremely dangerous one, made even more so by the wet on the descent, and it's very slippy.
Well, let me now give you the race situation so far. The riders have started the climb of the Col de la Jouplein. 3 riders got there first: Alberto Camargo, Thierry Claverola and Frédéric Vichot. But since the climb started, they have been joined by 7 other riders. Here they are: Montoya, Bourguignon, Ruiz Cabestany, Roberto Conti, Bruno Cornier, Dmitry Konishev and the Spaniard Espinosa. Those 10 men have built a lead of 2 minutes and 25 seconds over the yellow jersey group, and Greg LeMond is believed to be now 6 minutes behind the head of the field. Well, we can now bring you these pictures taken on the Col de la Jouplein and recorded by our own motorcycle cameraman, Glenn Wilkinson, who arrived here driven by our French motorcycle pilot, Patrice Diallo. These pictures are exclusive to us.
Well, these 10 riders on the climb of the Jouplein were split by an extremely hard attack from Thierry Claverola, the king of the mountains, a year ago, and he began to move clear of the field, and this is very typical of Thierry Claverola, Paul.
Well, he made a similar effort last year when he was away on the day to Alpe d'Huez with Miguel Indurain. He can really get up well and climb very quickly, and once he's away, it's difficult for him to be caught because he's just a fantastic climber.
Well, this is an attack here by Gert-Jan Teunissen. So Teunissen has come up from the main field, and we certainly haven't seen too much of Teunissen in the Tour de France this year. He suffered yesterday on Alpe d'Huez where he won before, but today he looks as though he's trying now to close the gap up to Claverola.
Well, Teunissen obviously upset by his performance yesterday, and I think he really wanted to try and get some kind of revenge. But when you've had 12 months out of competition, it's very difficult to come back to the level of the competition here in the Tour de France.
Well, as we look here at Gert-Jan Teunissen, let's just go back to the descent of the Col de Colombier. We know how wet it's been there today, and this is the result of one of the crashes, and it looks a little bit serious for the Colombian rider who's lying on the side of the road. I regret at the moment we are unable to identify him for you. The other rider is Marino Lajareta, and Marino Lajareta doesn't seem too badly injured as he gets back on his bike here and is able to take up the chase again. The Colombian rider, though, he looks as I'm afraid he is out of the Tour de France. Back onto the Col de la Jouplan, and this is Claverola. He's staying away as he comes up towards the summit. He's got a lead of 20 seconds over Thierry Bourguignon. Now all he's got to do now, Paul, is make his way, I would think, rather precariously down the other side.
Well, he'll have to take it very carefully because this descent down from Jouplan is one of the worst in the Tour de France. And on top of that, with it being wet, the riders' brakes don't work too well, and it's very difficult to judge the speed and correct the speed when you come into a corner. And I think we'll see one or two crashes.
And as I told you earlier, Greg LeMond having another bad day in the Tour de France. You can now see these pictures of him, and he does look as though he continues to suffer his way through the Alps. This is taken at the back of the field after the second feeding station today, and LeMond destined now to lose his 5th place overall in the Tour de France. Well, the next time we'll see the riders, they should be coming into our view on the finishing line, and it could well be that Claverola and Bourguignon will be together. Well, the crowd here at the finishing line are as in the dark as we are today, I'm afraid, because the giant television screen is showing them the same picture you are seeing at the moment, but there are still 2 riders in fact, only 2 riders now having survived the descent of the Jouplan. Miguel Indurain has swept up everybody except Thierry Claverola and Thierry Bourguignon, and they are now about 200 meters from our view, and we can hear the voice of Bernard Hinault on the car radio. Hinault, of course, 5 times a winner of the Tour de France, and he tells us that the 2 are riding side by side. 2 Frenchmen coming into our view, Paul.
Yes, at the moment they're playing cat and mouse, though. They're slowing down. Claverola doesn't want to do any work at all. He's been away for a long time. At the moment they're watching each other, and the gap to the main field is closing rapidly. It's actually only 50 seconds, so one of the 2 of them is going to have to make a decision quickly.
Well, Hinault says that Thierry Bourguignon has attacked. Thierry Claverola has tried to counter the move. They're just hanging on in front of the yellow jersey group of Miguel Indurain. It does appear then the big loser today is Greg LeMond, because he is not, as far as we know, in that group, which has virtually reformed. So the 2 leaders and 2 Frenchmen at that now coming up towards the last mountain-top finish. It's not quite a mountain, but here they are as they come up to the finish. Bourguignon on the left of our picture. The little climber, Thierry Claverola, on the right. The man who was the king of the mountains. He's now coming up towards the line. Bourguignon attacks. Bourguignon had a tremendously hard day in the Alps yesterday as he passed through his hometown. Today, Claverola passed through his, and Claverola is coming away. Thierry Claverola, but he may have misjudged this, but I don't know. Bourguignon's trying again, but he's beaten. He's beaten as Thierry Claverola ends an excellent day in the Alps. For him, he rides away from Thierry Bourguignon as he comes up to the line. Look at the time, 7.5 hours today for Clavy as he comes over the line in 7:26 and 41 seconds. And Thierry Claverola is the winner of this weather-beaten stage today. Second to Bourguignon, and third over the that's Thierry Bourguignon crossing the line now. And the gap should be no more than about half a minute. Oh, it's less than that, Paul, because this is now another big group, and this looks like Eric Canitou who's leading out here.
Followed by Claudio Chiappucci. There's the yellow jersey, so we know he's in there. I couldn't see Gianni Bugno.
And up to the line, and on the line there, it's one of the Histor team who's come close, but we didn't see. Bugno is certainly there. There's the yellow jersey of Indurain. And I wonder now if that's enough for him to win the Tour. It should be. And this is Roberto Conti, tailed off a little bit, but in the front of the action all day today. Fignon crossing the line there, 45 seconds down on the winner. And as we look now at the riders as they come over the line, that group, Paul, that we've just seen finish was nothing like as big as we've been led to believe.
They must have exploded on the last few meters of the Jouplan, and a few riders got tailed up on the descent there, because this descent under conditions like this is absolutely horrendous.
So the riders are now coming in literally in dribs and drabs. The one man, of course, we're missing is Greg LeMond, and it'll be a little while before Greg comes in, I think, and it might well be by the end of the day we'll find that Greg LeMond has dropped out of the top 6 overall. There's another large group finishing today. And so Greg is in all sorts of trouble. They do say, in fact, that his feet are badly infected and that the situation is becoming quite serious, and that it may require some urgent attention after the Tour de France is over. But this main field, I can tell you, having seen the descent of the Joux Plane today, it was so slippery on the way down. There was a slight loose gravel on the top, and riders were coming down there very, very precariously indeed, because the bends were hairpin bends. Paul, you've come down the Joux Plane before. Have you ever seen it quite so bad as today?
Well, definitely not, but under these conditions it really is very scary, because on top of the fact that it's slippy, made more slippy by the rain, you've got the gravel, this descent bounces a lot, and it's so dangerous. I've seen riders just go off the edge and into the forest.
Well, this little group here on the climb, we managed to have got a camera down the road a little ways now to show us this picture as they come up towards the finish here. A very bedraggled lot they are. I think by the end of the day, once we manage to catch up with the news, because our radio tour, which always keeps us informed from out on the course, obviously the same problem applies to them today, because they use a similar system to the cameras, where they have a helicopter relay their words to us, which means that we can hear the race over 100 kilometres.
Well, that's Pensek who just came over the line there with Capestani. A lot of riders lost a fair bit of time today. It looks as if this is Jean-Francois Bernard coming through. He did an awful lot of work on the climb of Joux Plane there to help Miguel Indurain again.
Well, it hasn't been a great tour for Pensek. He came into the race. There's Jean-Francois Bernard just come in, but he again was reported to be doing a great deal of work in that chase group, leading Indurain on the climb, as he did yesterday on Alpe d'Huez, but he's dropped off as it's come to the top of the Joux Plane. It's a great shame we couldn't show those pictures on the Joux Plane. It is a viciously hard climb. It's extremely narrow. It's barely wider than the width of a saloon car. It twists and turns its way up. There were a lot of people out there today who must have got extremely wet indeed. There you can see the finish of the Tour de France. To the right of our picture, by the way, the road quite literally comes to an end with a barrier and then the forest, because this is a road which literally goes to nowhere 50 yards after the riders cross the line. Just to remind you of the result today then, a win for Thierry Claverola from Thierry Bourguignon. The two Thierrys had their day today, and so did France. I'm only sorry our pictures couldn't have told you the story better.
Let's have a look now at the overall situation. No change at all in the top 4 places. Miguel Indurain leading Gianni Bugno, Claudio Chiappucci and Charlie Motte. But Luc Leblanc is now in 5th place. Greg LeMond has dropped out of the top 6. 6 is Laurent Fignon, but tonight Greg LeMond 14 minutes and 1 second behind in 8th place overall. Now that crash on the Col de la Colombière, which was in fact between Marino Lajareta and the man we couldn't identify, was the Colombian Reynal Montoya. Well, he's certainly out of the Tour de France, and we don't yet have news of his injuries. Now, on a happier note, don't forget this Sunday the Tour de France ends. It's your last chance to enter our competition, and you only have to guess the winner of the stage in Paris, and you could be the one who will receive the winner's yellow jersey of the Tour de France, signed by not only the winner, but by the man who wins the stage on the Champs-Élysées. Here's the address you write to with the name of the person you think will win the final stage of the Tour de France. It is to Tour de France Competition, Fortel, 142 Lower Marsh, London, SE1 7AE. We must have your entries by Friday at the latest. And don't forget all of the results on page 465 on Fortel. Well, sorry about the weather today, but let's hope it's better tomorrow when the race leaves the Alps and heads down to Aix-les-Bains. I know tonight Miguel Indurain will feel a very happy and contented leader of this year's Tour de France. But for the moment, from Paul, Gary and me, I'll say a very good night to you.